Hello, this is Linda Lysakowski, and we're back with another Learn with Linda session. And I hope you'll really enjoy this one. It's titled Move Donors Up the Donor Pyramid by Using the 4 Keys to Building Good Donor Relationships. And I think this is a lesson that all of us can benefit from. Every nonprofit needs to build good donor relationships. It's really all about fundraising. They've often described as being 3 key words. You know, if you've been in real estate, you know that the 3 key words are location, location, and location. Well, in fundraising, the 3 key words are relationships, relationships, relationships. So if you're in the right place today, if you have a lot of loyal donors in your file, but you don't know how to get them to move up. Maybe you have a lot of what we call mid-level donors, or even low-end donors that you think are capable of giving more money, but you're not quite sure how to move them up that donor pyramid. So if that's why you're here, we're going to answer your questions. Or maybe your organization hired you to raise big bucks. You know, we all get those jobs where our organizations expect us to go out and raise big bucks, but they don't even have a donor base in place. They have very few people in their system, maybe only a couple of hundred donors or even less. Maybe they have no donors in their place, but they somehow expect you to go out and perform miracles. Well, it doesn't work quite that easy, as we all know. But after this session, maybe you'll be able to figure out some small miracles that you can create on your own. Or maybe you just want to get the most bang for your buck. You don't want to waste your time doing things that aren't productive. And so many organizations spend a lot of time doing things that aren't very productive. For instance, holding special events that really don't do much to build relationships with their donors. Maybe it's a golf tournament or a bowling tournament or a tennis tournament or a run or a walk. And people are there because they like to run, walk, play golf, bowl, whatever it is. They're not there because they really have a deep relationship with your organization. So this session, we're going to talk about how to build those relationships so that you're getting the most bang for your buck and you're not wasting your time doing a lot of things that cause a lot of work and really result in very little success. Or maybe you're just curious about why some organizations in town seem to always be able to land those big gifts. You pick up the newspaper and you see that maybe a competitor of yours or some other nonprofit in your community has just received a $100,000 gift or a $1 million gift or a $50,000 gift, and you think, gosh, you know, I struggle just getting people to give $100 or $500. So maybe that's why you're here, just because you want to know how people are landing these big gifts. Well, the answer goes back to what I said earlier: relationships, relationships, relationships. And you can pretty much guarantee that those organizations that are raising the big bucks are doing it because they took the time to build those relationships with their donors. So throughout this brief webinar, and I'm trying to keep these webinars down to 20 to 30 minutes because I know people are very busy and you don't have a whole lot of time. So I'm obviously not going to be able to tell you everything I know, but I am going to introduce you to a course that I have that you might be interested if you want to read and learn more about this. And everybody who signs up for that course gets a free ebook called The Nonprofit Quick Guide to Cultivating Donors. So you might find that helpful going forward too. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the course, but let's dive in and talk about building those relationships. And I mentioned there are 4 keys to building good donor relationships. There's a lot of steps involved, but they're basically narrows down to 4 keys. One is researching your donors, knowing who the donors are that have the ability to give, because you can't get a major gift without 3 steps: linkage, ability, and interest. So they have to, first of all, have the ability to give. They need to have some kind of relationship with you. And then the other thing is what their interests are. Are they interested in what you're raising money for? So the first step is researching the donors. And the second key is meeting with donors one-on-one or prospective donors And then the third step is holding cultivation events. And the overarching step that encompasses all of this is listening to your donors. So we're going to cover all four of those briefly in this session, and then we'll tell you how you can learn a little bit more. So researching the donor's interests, it's important to understand that if you want to build lifelong relationships with your donors, you have to understand their preferences and their interests. For example, what do they give to? Let's pretend you're an animal rescue group, which is why I have a picture of a kitten here. And there are obviously in this world people who are dog people and people who are cat people. I happen to be a cat person, so I chose a picture of a cat. That doesn't mean I don't like dogs or wouldn't support an organization that rescues dogs, because I have supported dog rescue groups. But what really pulls at my heartstrings would be seeing a picture like this of a kitten who really needed some help. So knowing what a donor is interested in, maybe you have several programs within your organization, and some donors are more interested in one program than they are another. So it's important to understand what your donors are interested in. And then when do they give? There are some donors who like to wait till the end of the year and then they write out all their charitable donations, maybe for tax purposes, and they're not quite sure how much they're going to give, but at the end of the year they do it. Some people give more spontaneously. They get a letter or a phone call or an email that really tugs at their heartstrings, and they say, this is a good cause, I'm going to make a donation. I have a friend who's very responsive to direct mail. I personally am not a direct mail person, but he gets literally hundreds of direct mail appeals because the organizations he gives to know he supports them that way. And what he does with these mail appeals is he saves them all, and every 3 months, for 4 times a year, he sits down and goes through all his mail appeals and puts them on a pile. These are the organizations I really want to support. These are the organizations that sound good. So if I have enough money after I've given to my top priority, I'll probably give them something. And then the third pile usually is the round file pile. Those are the ones who go in the trash because he's not at all interested. So knowing how and when donors give is really important. Some donors prefer monthly giving. Some like to give on a credit card. Some like to just go to the website and make their donation that way, knowing it's secure. Other people don't feel that secure, and they'd rather sit down and write out a check and mail it to you. So knowing all that information about your donors is really good. But you can also research donors or people that might be prospective donors to your organization. There are a lot of tools that you can use, things like donor search, and there's a number of different organizations like that that will help you with the research. And you can get anecdotal research by doing screening meetings, bringing in a group of volunteers and reviewing your donor list or a list of prospective donors and saying, you know, what do you think this person is capable of giving? What do you think they're interested in? And who's the right person to make the ask? So there's a lot of research that goes into this before you're ready to get out and start talking to donors. I mentioned listen as the last key, but I want to talk about that first because it's so important in building relationships. And remember that communications is a two-way street. Some of you who have taken communication classes might have focused on things like, how do I write well, and how do I present well, how do I speak? And certainly there are lots of courses, and I'm not saying don't take those. I've taken a lot of those courses myself. Public speaking class, you can go to your local college and take one. You can probably take some of these through AFP or through other means and methods. But communications is a two-way street, and the important thing is you have to listen to what your donors are saying, because a lot of times you don't even have to make an ask. If you listen right, the donor will tell you how much they want to give and when they're ready to give and what they want to give to. So listening makes your job a whole lot easier, Plus, it makes your donor feel that you really care about them. And you want your donors to feel because you want to really care about them. And if you don't care about them, it's going to come through very loud and clear, and you'll probably lose them to some other organization who does listen to them and who does care about them. So remember, throughout all this, the listening part is really, really critical. So how my course can help you, one of the things that we cover in this course is how to use some of these various research tools, how to do a screening meeting. We'll learn about one-on-one donor cultivation, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. And we'll also learn about cultivation events, which I'm going to talk to you very shortly about. But most of all, I think you'll learn how important it is to listen, because that is so critical to build good relationships with your donors. So how do you learn to build those relationships? Well, as I said, it starts with the research part of it, electronic research, doing screening meetings. And you might think, well, how do we even start this? How do we do a screening meeting? Well, start by leveraging the connections that your board and your staff and volunteers have, especially if you're one of those organizations where they hired you to raise money, but they have very little donors in their base and they expect you to go out and find new ones. Well, if you have to go out and find new donors, it's going to be much more challenging. But you can do some electronic research. You can do screening sessions. You can leverage the connections that you already have on your board. And your staff members have connections too. Don't forget, staff members have businesses that they do business with. They have friends that maybe just because they work for a nonprofit and aren't a high income person, that doesn't mean they don't have friends who aren't high income people and friends that are business owners. So don't forget your staff and don't forget your volunteers. Involve them and try to find out what connections are available. That's the most important step, is making sure that you have connections so that you do have that relationship at least started, even though you haven't built it to your organization. You know someone who has a relationship with this person, and that's a huge start to get you rolling on this process. And then you can use your own connections. You probably have a lot of connections with people who have some kind of an interest in your organization. I would hope that as a fundraiser, you're working for an organization that you feel passionate about. And what I find is most of the time people who feel passionate about certain things, whether it's the environment or education or healthcare, their friends tend to be also people who care about those same causes. So you may have some people from a previous employer that you have connections with, through previous jobs, through your children, if you have children, maybe some of their parents, their friends' parents. You might have all kinds of connections, alumni, people you went to school with, people you worship with. There may be a lot of people in your own network that are possible donors for your organization. So cultivating these donors is the big step. How do we start to build relationships? How do we cultivate those people into becoming lifelong donors and potentially major donors for our organization? Well, one of the things that you have to remember that's different about nonprofit organizations and building other relationships. Sometimes if I came from a sales background when I came into this profession, and in some sales jobs, it's important to build a personal relationship with you and that customer because they're going to keep coming back to you. But when you're working for a nonprofit, it's not important to build a relationship between you and that donor. It's important to build a relationship for your organization and that donor. So there's a little bit of a twist to this that you don't find when you're trying to build relationships. If you're, for example, trying to build a personal relationship with yourself and maybe a potential spouse, it's all about the two of you together. But when you're building a relationship for your organization, you have to always remember that you're building those relationships not for your own benefit or for your own personal use, but for the organization. That doesn't mean that you don't become, I've oftentimes become lifelong friends with donors to organizations, but it was still, I was encouraging them to have a relationship with my organization. I just happened to be the person that introduced them. So you can sort of think of yourself as the matchmaker. You're the matchmaker who brings together the donor and the nonprofit organization. So how do you cultivate donors? Well, there's two ways to do it. There are activities and there are events. So first I'm going to talk about one-on-one cultivation activities. And this might include bringing someone in privately for a private tour of your organization. Maybe you just bring in one donor or a couple or one business at a time, maybe several people who represent that business or a foundation, but you take them on a private tour and you're working on building that personal relationship with you and the donor, with your organization and the donor. And you might also accomplish this through one-on-one visits, visiting donors in their home, visiting donors at their place of business, having lunch and breakfast meetings as individuals. This is a great way. And there are times when you want to cultivate individuals one-on-one, and there are times when you want to cultivate groups. Usually when you cultivate individuals, it's because you're trying to raise them up the ladder a little bit. You think it's a major gift prospect and you really want to find out more about them as an individual. Maybe you want to pick their brain about something. Maybe they're a person who's a great marketing person and you want to get advice from them on how you can better market your organization. So there are many times when doing the one-on-one cultivation activities are the best way to approach potential donors. And how my course can help you with this is you're going to learn to leverage those board, staff, and volunteer connections. I actually give you some tools to do some brainstorming on finding out who those connections are and how you can build on those. And you'll learn more about when it's appropriate to cultivate donors one-on-one. But then there are other times when you want to cultivate groups of donors. Perhaps you're not very successful with raising money from your business community. So you want to cultivate a group of business leaders to find out more about what they're looking for. Or maybe you raise money from churches and you want to cultivate a group of pastors and key clergy people in your community. Or maybe you want to cultivate the media because you feel like you're not getting good enough public exposure and you want to cultivate the media before you even start raising money from these groups. So there are a lot of different ways to cultivate groups of donors. You can do it through what we call sometimes house parties or cottage parties, cocktail parties. Maybe a board member or a volunteer hosts a cocktail party in their home. And these are not ask events. These are strictly to get to know each other events, where maybe you give a little presentation about the organization. But again, you spend most of your time at those meetings listening to the donors, listening to these prospective donors and what they're interested in. One of the things that I did in one of the organizations I worked with, every month I would schedule at least one-on-one lunch meeting with the president of the university because people wanted to get to know all about what was happening at the university, and who better to hear it from than the top. And a lot of people who were high-powered individuals in the community, major philanthropists or business leaders, they want to hear it from the top. So maybe arranging some one-on-one luncheons. With business leaders, they tend to seem to like breakfast better because they can come in, be out of there maybe in it at 7:30 and out by 8:30 and still get to their work day and get their work done. So those are some groups that you might want to consider and how you cultivate them. The key to a successful cultivation event, there are several keys, but one of them is, who is it that you want to cultivate? Figure out your guest list and don't try to do a mishmash of individual philanthropists and clergy people and media people. Try to focus on one area because your message is going to be different and your venue is going to be different based on the guests. So figure out who it is you want to cultivate. And maybe you want to cultivate all of those groups that I just mentioned, but just not all at the same time, please. Have a series of events that suit your guests. So the first thing is figuring out who you want to cultivate. And then the host, and the host should never be the executive director of your organization. It needs to be someone who is well known and well respected with that particular audience. So that's one of the most critical things of success in hosting a cultivation event is who the host is going to be. And then the event venue and the time will depend again on that audience. Is it better to do a breakfast meeting? Do they prefer a lunch meeting, a cocktail party? You know, what works best for that particular audience? And usually we do these events in the organization when it's possible. But for some organizations, it doesn't make sense to do that because maybe there's nothing going on in your organization. All your work is out in the community. So you might have these in a board member's home. You might have them at a country club, a restaurant. There's all sorts of venues, and we'll talk a lot more about that in my course. And then the agenda. You always want to have a prepared agenda, keeping it very brief and making sure you have time to adequately tell your story, but more important, that you have time to listen to the donor. So you can tell your story various ways. You can have testimonials from some of your clients. You can have videos. You can have a tour of the organization if that's appropriate. There are many ways you can tell your story, and you can even give them a takeaway, maybe a written brochure or case statement or something that they can take home and read more about your story. But make sure when you do any kind of cultivation events that there's time to listen to what the people have to say and maybe ask them some leading questions, do a Q&A period, or even have them fill out a questionnaire. But listening is so, so critical. And then follow up. Maybe follow up with the people who attended the event, follow up with the people who weren't able to make it, and see if they want to be invited to another event at a different time. Ask them what their opinion of the event was, and are there other people that they might want to suggest that you invite to events. So that follow-up is really another critical step. And cultivation events really do pay off when they're done right. I just want to give you one brief example. I worked with a homeless shelter that actually engaged me to help them develop a corporate appeal. And I said to them when I met with them, you know, I don't think you're going to be able to raise money from the business community because they don't really know you. They don't really know what you do. I didn't know what they did until I went in and toured the place and found out they were much more than just a bed for the night for a homeless person. They provided medical care and dental care and helping them build their resume and look for jobs and get apartments. And they did a whole lot more than I realized. And I said, you're not going to be able to raise money until people know more about you. So let's host a cultivation event. And I won't go into great detail about their event, but it was amazing. And we told people we were not going to ask for money at that event, and we didn't. But we did tell them when they came to the event that we were planning an annual business appeal. And before people left that event, we had probably 30 people volunteer to help us raise money. So that event paid off. And when they were ready to go out, they more than raised their goal because they had cultivated these donors and they really did it right. They followed every step that I outline in my course. So what my course will help you do as far as planning these cultivation events, because I can't give it to you all in 20 or 30 minutes, but it'll tell you how to choose your audiences, how to choose the right venue for your audience, how to choose the right host and get them really enthused about doing this, how to plan the agenda. You'll get samples of agendas. You'll get samples of feedback forms that we've used with cultivation events, and you'll learn how to follow up. So all of that is covered in this course. It's, as I say, way too much to tell you now, but I think you'll really get a lot out of this course, and you'll be able to build those relationships if you follow all these instructions. So the course is called Build Relationships That Lead to Major Gifts. And it's a 6-lesson course, but like all of my courses, it's all online, and you take this at your own pace. You can sign up and take a lesson every day, and you'll be done in a week, or you can spread it out over 6 weeks or 6 months, whatever works for you. And as with all of my courses, this is approved for CFRE credit. So you get 6 CFRE continuing ed units. If that's important to you, if you are already a CFRE and you need to renew, or if you're thinking about becoming one, this is a easy way to get those CFRE credits, and you don't have to travel anywhere and spend a couple nights in a hotel to get 6 credits. So I highly recommend this course. I think you'll really get a lot out of it, and you'll learn how to cultivate people both individually and in cultivation events. And now for the best news. I'm currently offering this course at the lowest price I've ever offered it. And if you just click on the orange link below, you'll be able to sign up for the course right now and get this special low price. So I look forward to seeing you in my course. Bye for now.